The Executor in Elden Ring Nightreign sucks. I'm not really making this video with the expectation that he'll be improved or made better. I'm just complaining because he's my favorite character, it's basically the only one I play, and I have grievances to air. First off, I should probably clarify that he doesn't really suck. None of the Nightfarers actually are bad. They're all more than capable of being effective in different ways. The Executor too has things he does very well. So to be fair, I guess I'll list those things now before I start criticizing him in a moment. The Executor has the highest arcane stat, which means that he's the best at applying ailments. The Nightfarer with the second highest arcane is Iron Eye, and when you compare the two you can see how much more the Executor has. It's more than twice as much. One notable thing about the arcane stat is that it's static. This stat doesn't increase as the characters level up. Whatever their arcane stat is at level 1 is what it will be at level 15. So Executor can get the full effect of his arcane stat basically right away. When playing in multiplayer, it's not uncommon for me to be the main DPS and outdamage all of my companions, at least for most of the early levels. And I can do that because status buildup works differently in Nightreign than it did in Elden Ring. In Elden Ring, only some status effects were affected by Arcane, like Bleed, Poison, and Madness, but others like Frost and Scarlet Rot were not. And on top of that, those status effects would only scale if the weapon had Arcane scaling. So if you had a regular katana, the katana would have bleed, but that bleed was not affected by your arcane stat. You would need to turn that katana into an occult or bleed katana, and then your arcane would affect the buildup. In Nightreign though, status effects are a lot better. The buildup for Frost and Scarlet Rot is affected by arcane, and even better, the buildup is still increased, whether or not the weapon you're using has arcane scaling. As you can see here, Wilder is using the Moonlight Greatsword, and it has no arcane scaling. When used against the practice dummy, it takes 3 swings for him to proc. When the same weapon is used by the Executor, however, it only takes 2 hits. Of note is that this also works with weapon buffs. The status buildup of weapons imbued with Chilling Mist, Poison Mist, or Sapuku also increase based on your arcane, meaning that the Executor could be absolutely monstrous even at level 1. If you get the relics that turn your starting weapon into a bleed-infused weapon, and one that turns your Ash of War into Chilling Mist, then you have a weapon that's guaranteed to be good even against the Night Lord, provided that you upgrade it during the run. For basically every enemy and boss, you'll be able to proc Frostbite and 2 stacks of Bleed in the first 5 to 10 seconds of the encounter. If you're playing in co-op, when these ailments activate, the boss will usually get staggered, interrupting their movements, further helping you make your teammate safe and let you both keep wailing on him. If you have the very excellent Caligo relic, it comes with the added effect of making you do more damage against frostbitten enemies, and makes you invisible when frostbite procs nearby. Which is great, because now you do more damage, and the aggro goes to your allies, allowing you to take full advantage of that extra damage, while your attacks also build up more stacks of bleed. It's fantastic against basically everything unless they're immune. Now the reason why it's so strong, especially in the early levels, is because your arcane stat is what it's going to be. It's at 28 at level 1 and it's at 28 at level 15. So you don't have to wait to level up to make full use of the damage that stat's going to let you do. You won't be quite as effective towards the end of the run compared to your companions because now they'll have gained all of their relevant stats, they've gotten equipment and passives that they like. The gap that you will have had at the beginning will have closed, but hopefully you did a lot of work in those low levels, which allowed your team to go through those low level areas quickly. You know, you melted down those low level mini bosses and NPCs, which gave you more time to get more equipment that made your allies as strong as they ended up being towards the end. And even though it's not quite as effective towards the 3rd day, it's not like ailments suddenly become weak, they're actually still very strong, even against the Everdark Night Lords. The way that ailments work is that once you proc an ailment, the next instance of that ailment will be harder to proc. Enemies will build up resistance to it the more it happens. But even if they develop max resistance to it, you can still proc it if you play well, and each ailment will build up resistance independently. So for example, Adele is weak to Frost. It's pretty easy to get at least 3 Frost procs during the fight. On the other hand, he is resistant to Bleed, and after his first bleed stack he gains maximum resistance. That doesn't mean you shouldn't try and bleed him, but Adele is also very weak against Poison and Scarlet Rot, the first 2 instances of which will happen right away. So if throughout your run you manage to get a poison and a scarlet rot weapon, you can quickly apply those and go back to focusing on frost and bleed throughout the duration. Ailments are even better against things like Noster, because the moth and the scorpion have independent resistances, meaning you can proc the ailments on each one a lot. The moth is very weak against frost and bleed. The scorpion is also weak against frost, but resistant to bleed, though that bleed resistance doesn't end up mattering very much. He stays in the same area very often, which lets you keep attacking him, so it's not uncommon to get 2 or 3 stacks of bleed on him throughout the fight. Everdark Lieber is pretty weak to all ailments, both because he has low thresholds to get procced, and because he doesn't move around as much as something like Adele or Gladius, giving you ample opportunities to keep building status. Plus, every one of his summons is a new thing that has not built up any status resistance, making each new one extremely susceptible to repeated ailment stacks. So, ailments are good, it is what Executor excels at. Aspect of the Crucible Furry is also very good. You can use it as a free heal, you can use it to get away from the Nightreign. The Roar is extremely effective in stun-locking groups. This is helpful for your co-op partners because if you just knock enemies down, not only are you hitting less of them probably, but you're also knocking them away from your allies, making it harder for them to do effective damage. With the Roar, minor enemies are left standing, which lets your allies do what they want with them. If you have the relic that heals on Roar, that's even better. It gives your allies even more peace of mind since they know that they're going to get healed even if they take a hit while going all out on these stun-locked enemies. It's also great for reviving. The Roar also heals you, so you'll be able to relatively safely spam it. Okay. The Executor has a lot going for it. So why do I say he sucks? Well, it's because the rest of his kit doesn't synergize and is nearly useless. I like this. I am happy to make do with this. But comparatively, the rest of the cast has more going for them. The point of Nightfarers is that they let you lean into very different archetypical playstyles, like a ranger, a mage, a summoner, and their character skills and passives support those playstyles. They help each one feel distinct. Raider is a big man with lots of strength, HP, and hyper armor, so his skill is a big punch that he can't be knocked out of, and he takes reduced damage for its duration. Some skills are even more essential since they are what makes the playstyle possible, like the Revenant or the Recluse. Even Wilder, whose skills and playstyle are kind of basic, still derives some benefit from it. The Executor does not. His skills do not let him lean into his unique playstyle, and they suck. First, let's look at his passive. Tenacity increases your damage and your stamina recovery when triggered. It lasts for 20 seconds, and it's triggered by inflicting a nearby enemy with a status ailment. Just kidding, that's not how it works. That would make it a good skill. It's actually triggered when you recover from a status ailment, making it impractical to make use of. Because it only lasts 20 seconds, I assume you're meant to aggressively confront the enemy right away. But if you just recovered from an ailment, you usually aren't in a position to do that. Like, if you took enough hits to proc Bleed or Madness, then you're probably almost dead. You're on the back foot, you need time and distance to heal. So by the time you're able to make use of Tenacity, most of that 20 seconds will be gone. It's just not useful to get a damage buff in situations you don't control. Which brings us to Sapuku. Sapuku is an Ash of War that lets you stab yourself in exchange for a weapon buff that increases your attack and your bleed buildup. It's pretty good. You can get it on your starting weapon via a relic. It lasts 1 minute and the stab counts as a bleed proc, meaning that it can activate Tenacity. Having control of Tenacity makes it easier to use effectively. However, I think it still kind of sucks, especially compared to its more user-friendly cousin, Chilling Mist. Sapuku you'll want to do at a distance before engaging a boss, which will waste some of your Tenacity time as you run towards it. You can do Sapuku closer to the boss before engaging, but then you're at the risk of being spotted and attacked during the animation. And then the combined damage of Sapuku and the attack might kill you, or at least will force you to want to heal, wasting even more of Tenacity's time. Sapuku is also hard to reapply during combat. You need a sizable opening to use it, meaning you'll have to forego an opening that you would have used to deal damage. Plus, if you've already taken some damage and then use Sapuku, you will definitely die if you get hit. With all these constraints, I never feel like I'm making full use of the character's passive, Tenacity. And without Tenacity, Sapuku is just not that good. It's outclassed, in my opinion, by Chilling Mist. Because of the way resistance increases every proc, it's better to use 2 different ailments than just rely on one. The Frostbite status effect also increases the damage the enemy takes from you and your allies. The Caligo Relic on top of that increases the damage that you do personally to frostbitten enemies. Because it's also an attack, you don't have to forego an opening to reapply it. You can reapply it and attack the enemy at the same time. It doesn't take any of your HP, so you never are concerned that you're putting yourself at further risk by using it during combat. It's just better. But even if it wasn't, that still wouldn't be good. It would still be bad if Tenacity was only useful when you had this specific Ash of War on your weapon. Here's how I think Tenacity should be improved. The Executor is the ailment class, that's his thing. The easiest way to fix this is to make Tenacity activate when you inflict an ailment on the enemy. In this way, the damage and stamina buff happens while you're attacking, letting you make full use of that 20 seconds, and encouraging you to press your advantage. Or you could be a bit more creative, you could have different status ailments give you different buffs. Or actually, you could have the passive just make status effects more damaging, more effective when it's done by an Executor. Anything like that, I think, would work. Give me something that lets me lean into my role as an ailment guy. The character skill has the same problem. The Cursed Katana is cool, it's nice to do the deflects, it feels good, but it's not very effective, and it doesn't synergize with an ailment-focused build. The Cursed Katana itself doesn't even do bleed. The thing with the deflecting is that 90% of the time, it is both harder and less effective than just attacking and dodging. Many attacks, when you deflect them, will push you far back, meaning you'll have to make your way back to the enemy to attack. Switching to the Cursed Katana is also just very inconvenient. If you have a weapon buff on the weapon, it'll get rid of it. If you're holding your katana two-handed and then you switch to the Cursed Katana, you'll then be holding it one-handed. This annoys me because I prefer the two-handed Executor katana moveset. Especially the running attack, it has a huge range, which means that anytime I use the Cursed Katana, which is already a waste of time, I then have to waste even more time two-handing my normal blade. The only situation that I think the Cursed Katana excels at is when you're fighting a humanoid knight enemy that attacks multiple times, namely the Crucible Knights and the Banished Knights. It's even better if you learn the Knights' attack patterns well enough that you know when you can effectively guard counter. Plus, Crucible Knights I think are immune to bleed anyway, so you're not getting much effectiveness from your ailments. This looks really cool, and it is effective against these type of enemies, but even so, you're working really hard just to achieve more or less parity with what you would already be doing with just normal attacks. It's flashy, it's cool, but it's not effective. You're better off dodging. Dodges have a larger window of invulnerability, it leaves your damage-dealing weapon in your hand, and you can control where you dodge to, meaning you can position yourself to be ready to attack the enemy repeatedly. I'm not actually sure how I would fix the Cursed Katana. I do know that I would want it to somehow synergize with your arcane stat, with your ailment infliction. Maybe you could have it work alongside with Tenacity. The Cursed Katana could get a buff that makes it deal a lot more damage whenever you do an ailment, incentivizing you to switch back and forth between the Cursed Katana and your regular ailment-inflicting weapons. I suspect there's going to be some coping in the comments. Some people are going to be like, you just suck at the Cursed Katana, you suck at deflecting. You need to be skilled and switch back and forth between the regular katana and the Cursed Katana. And of course those people are wrong, I repeat my earlier points unaltered. Ultimately, the Executor doesn't suck in a way that's unviable. He's very viable. He has his uses. He sucks because he's a little boring. His skills are niche and of limited utility, and they don't let him lean into an interesting style of play. He'd be much better with even small changes. That doesn't mean I'm going to quit playing him, but I'm also not going to stop complaining about it either. That's the end of this video. As always, thank you very much for watching.